Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the Outhouse podcast, where we look at terrible movies. I'm known mostly on the internet as Ozzina Arcane, and if you're wondering why, hey, that's not a girl's voice, well, when I got isekai'd into the internet, they didn't change my voice. With me is my good friend, Matt. That's not very descriptive.
No. Um, I guess I'm introducing myself then.
Yeah.
So hello, I'm Mad Matt. I am a streamer and a YouTuber still, and I am slowly working on further developments
And,
as
well,
I become a VTuber apparently.
yeah. And also, we have my other friend, Tess Zero.
Hello, I am a game designer, YouTuber, exaggerator, and absolutely amazing at all of them.
Former Revere's Unknown member. Not that anyone
Yeah.
remembers that. Not that anyone remembers
I was
that.
like, what's Revere's Unknown? It's an unknown.
Exactly.
And
It's unknown, that's the thing.
last, the man of mystery, Ojunix.
I'm a gamer, I'm waifu collector, and I live under a rock.
Yes,
Literally.
yes. Don't touch his rock. He's
Like
very,
most
he's very
folks.
sensitive about it.
Don't touch the rock. It is his rock. There may like it, but this one is
There are
his.
many like it, but this one is his.
My rock may also bite.
So, the original idea behind the name of the podcast was kind of, it's a bit of a take on the movie genre, the grindhouse, but that's not necessarily going to be a focus of the types of movies we cover. Today, we're talking about the Dungeons and Dragons movie from the year 2000. Seems a good topic considering that there's a new one coming out this year, and also Wizards of the Coast took a complete dump on the community this past week.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first time that we've dealt with this kind of bullshit from the higher ups.
No.
Which is
Wouldn't be the
appropriate
first time,
considering
but
one of the
this
themes
is a
in this
whole new
movie.
level.
They basically, apparently, they decided to take a cue from Game Workshop and basically take a shit on everybody.
Yeah, the problem is Games Workshop was always like that, and D&D just decided to suddenly be like that. But we're not going to focus on that because we could do a whole podcast on that, and there's enough other people are talking about that. We're here to talk about this terrible movie that I actually saw for the first time today with you guys. I've never seen it before, and man, that CGI in the beginning has not aged well.
Oh man, yeah, this is my first time actually watching this one all the way through as well. And I have seen scenes of it. I've learned a lot about it through osmosis, but yeah, the CG in this is pretty bad.
Like many people back during the time when I was a young teenager, I thought that was like the coolest shit ever. But over the years, gained some knowledge. Yeah, that was crap.
I don't think it even looked good back then, as the thing.
But back then, when you don't have a well-developed brain at the point,
seeing it now, how a lot of the stuff at the opening was showing the tower and the clouds, and when the dragon comes in, a lot of it just looks really blurry, and it reminds me of when you play like one of those old PC games from like the 90s. And then you see how
opening is like really blurry as people are moving around. Yeah,
you see how terrible the FMVs look because they were not designed to be viewed on an HD screen.
Yeah, because the videos at the time were like 240p, but since they were shown on a CRT monitor, you would have seen them just fine.
But that's not the case.
I also love it how they was playing the epic music, and all you kept seeing was just fog for a good almost solid minute.
Just about.
No, I've got a list of things I want to talk about that I wrote notes down while we were watching.
If I may, before we get to that, I would also like to state that my history, unlike everyone else, I went to theaters to see this sucker. I was entertained at the time, but man, has my entertainment gone downhill with repeated viewings. I don't even know how many times I've seen this movie at this point.
I do want to point out that out of all the movies we have potentially planned, this is nowhere near the worst. In spite of how we feel about this.
This movie is way too entertaining to really be considered a bad movie, but it is ostensibly a terrible movie.
It's a bad movie. It's entertainingly bad.
This is one I really say This is when I say that was not good, but I wouldn't be mad that I paid the money for the ticket
But
because I still got enjoyment.
before we go into any of our specific talking points, I think a good idea is to kind of summarize the overall plot of the movie for anyone listening that may not have actually watched it themselves, so they don't are completely lost about the things we're talking about.
Or for people who have watched the movie, because to be fair, it does a terrible job of explaining most of this stuff.
Right, but I'm
Hey,
not.
well,
I'm not going too into detail. I just want to give like a brief overall summary. You know, we've got the cast of characters. We got the two rogues who Ojunix said shouldn't both be rogues because they were too different. But I'd kind of say the main character Ridley is like a swashbuckler rogue, and the other rogue Snails is like a scoundrel. He's a scoundrel.
Though the swashbuckler does gain apparently some casting capabilities, so I don't know if that's
There is some
swashbuckler from.
there actually is some stuff for that in D&D lore. Like rogues can use certain magic items at higher levels, but
Yes.
the other characters we got Elwood Gutworthy the dwarf, and who has a
An
first
amazing
name. He has a first name that sounds like it would belong to an elf.
Elf. But the second name, or the second part of his name, perfect for him.
We have. I just realized this character's last name. Looking at it, it's written Marina Pretensa. She's a pretense for the story.
I.
I didn't realize that. Didn't even say her last name at all in the movie.
No. No one says anyone's last name.
I think it
in
might have been
this
said
movie.
They
once.
barely even say their first name.
It might have been
They
said
barely say
once.
some of their first names, yeah.
But they didn't focus on it when they said it, so it didn't click with me until just reading it now. Her last name is literally pretense with a instead of an e at the end. There's the fifth hero character is Norda, who's like an elvish guardswoman who comes in much later in the movie, more or less. The villains are Profian, the evil wizard guy played by Jeremy Irons.
Who is just having a blast in this movie.
Every second that man is having it up and having fun.
He is eating all the ham, and it is glorious.
And I
He's
think
eating all the ham-based scenery.
somebody said something about Green Goblin, which caused me to say
Yes.
he is like if Green Goblin psychically possessed Emperor Palpatine, as in his personality and abilities.
Profion
does
sounds like a
kinda
heartburn
mesh.
medication.
Which is apt for his ending.
If just that one scene of him going,
Come to me. That's what I say when I see my waifus.
Give me the raw.
And then there's his main henchman Damodar. There's also
What
I almost
do you even say about this guy?
he looks like Manx's evil twin cousin.
he also has very cold lips.
Yes. We don't know why his lips are blue because as far as we know he's a human. He just has blue
Yes.
lips.
As a matter of fact, in the sequel, he doesn't even have blue lips.
He's a big fan of Ichiban lipstick for men.
Like
He's probably also the other actor who is actually probably having a good time in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
And while we were watching, I joked that his lips are blue because, he took a bet to hold his breath really long, and they just never turned back afterwards. There's
Apparently when
also
he turned undead, they must have healed somehow. I don't know.
the other main character we have to acknowledge is the Empress, who Profian wants to overthrow. There's a lot of other wizards and stuff whose names no one's going to remember by the time they finished watching the movie, so I'm not going to name all of them because we can't sit here going over every single side character that's in the movie. We'd take
Guy in a
forever.
robe number 25. Guy in a robe number 26.
Don't forget
Orc.
don't forget Orc number one
Orc 1 and Orc
number
2. Yeah.
Yeah, so before I start going over my list of things I noticed that I wanted to talk about, we'll go through you guys first. Matt, was there anything specific you wanted to talk about in regards to this movie?
Like just the movie itself in general.
The movie in general, like anything that stuck out to you that you thought was worth mentioning.
Honestly, if anything else is worth watching this movie, if there's any like one key scene that you can go to and go, there's still good stuff in this, the Tom Baker scene.
Right,
His dialogue and his acting is just like spot on, and he just gets like barely 2-3 minutes to be an elf.
It's a shame because he definitely he has that charm that's just so welcoming.
Effortless charm, yeah.
right. I remember when that we got to that scene, you had commented on how it was your favorite scene in the movie.
I didn't even know who Tom Baker was when I saw this movie the first time.
Same here. And I didn't even realize that was Tom Baker because I didn't know Doctor Who until years later.
Yeah, this movie came out in 2000. I probably didn't know who Tom Baker was until like 2006, 2007.
Right.
And by then I just went, wait, I've seen this guy before. Where the hell have I seen him before? And then all of a sudden my friends bring up at the time D&D and Tom Baker being in it. I'm like, wait. And I had to go on YouTube back then and try and find it, and sure enough, there he is.
All right. So going from left to right, Ojunix, is there anything specific you wanted to bring up about the movie?
Beholders are not fucking guard dogs.
Admittedly, that's one of the things I didn't write down. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, and the use of the beholder in this, because that's really kind of funny, because without the beholder, there's no reason for this to be Dungeons and Dragons. This is just a standard fantasy movie.
Right.
Pretty much.
Clearly. And yet, because even dragons, there's basic fantasy stuff. You can find those in
Yeah,
anything.
a staff that can control dragons. Okay, yeah, that could be a good MacGuffin to be fighting over, but
beholders, those have been pretty much exclusively a icon of Dungeons and Dragons, and you see them and it's just so wrong because that is not how they work in any way or capacity. There wouldn't be a bunch of them because beholders don't like other beholders, and they sure as hell would not be working with humans.
Right. Yeah, because TZ even asked when we got to that scene, is there even anything you could do to get a beholder to be loyal to you and follow your commands? It's like, no, because they literally see everything else, including other beholders, as inferior to themselves. They're also extremely paranoid that everyone's after their treasure.
Yeah. Speaking of which, by the way, since it does come up in the movie, Thieves Guilds, there's actually a very popular Thieves Guild that's run by Beholder, and in order to keep the Beholder happy, apparently its pet goldfish is like one of its favorite things. The goldfish has died we don't know how many times at this point, and his men keep replacing it because they don't want to get instantly roasted.
I mean, it's not saying it's impossible for a beholder to work with humans, or I should say humans work for it.
Yeah, humans working for it. It's, however, impossible for it to be working under humans and liking it.
You're right. But
willingly doing it.
But no, it's you see the one time you get to see one of the biggest icons of D&D, and they're basically being used as glorified guard.
And the worst thing was that it got distracted by someone throwing a pebble.
That would not work.
No,
it has eyes on its back. It should have seen them running.
Their sense of awareness is too high for that to ever work.
And they would see the pebble, but they'd also see the people throwing it and go kill them.
Yeah.
Right.
So TZ, did you have anything specific you wanted to talk about?
The CG in this is bad, but the practical effects are actually not terrible.
Yeah, that was a good point.
The orc costumes, a lot of the other monster costumes, the skeleton that actually talks.
Yeah, the talking skeleton, even the little gargoyle things, those were CG, but those weren't too bad.
It was small and simple.
Oh heck, the magical staves and the magic sword that we get to see by the end too. There's little tidbits to them, but darn, they are well made.
The only practical effect that I saw in the movie that actually looked terrible was Norda's blue plastic breastplate.
Yeah.
Emphasis on the breast, because this has boob armor complete with nipples.
Yeah,
for no reason.
Especially when she's cold at night.
He even has a ridiculous belly button. It's like, why do you make a breastplate like this at all?
Why? Oh, I didn't realize there was. Why is there a belly button on the armor?
Yes.
If anything, that would be a weak point.
Yeah.
And the sad
Most
thing
likely.
is in spite of how much this movie is known for being awful, like the practical effects gave the points where it used that instead of CGI a more realistic look than some actual more modern stuff that have a bigger budget that go completely CGI and stuff just looks unnatural.
Hmm.
I mean, CGI has definitely developed and upgraded a lot since those years, but at the same time, it
Same
would be
time, you
nice.
can still tell.
The fact is, if there were some practical effects, it looks good because you know it's actually there.
Yeah, because you
Yeah,
can.
and this was done at a time when you really needed to put a lot of money into CG to make it look good. And if you don't, you end up with stuff like this,
And
which is a shame because you can see that's where a lot of the budget must have gone into this because there were entire scenes that feel like they had to be cut out.
Yeah. Like there's whole story points that they literally
oh
have
yeah,
to just tell us about
the
because they couldn't.
the part where they got sucked into the map and were off screen interacting with a wraith and just told the other characters about it when they came back.
Like, yeah, that was a really interesting story. Too bad we didn't see it happen.
That was
Back to the Tom Baker scene when he's talking to Ridley and Ridley's telling him, I saw a dragon being born in my dreams." And it's like, oh, shame we didn't get to see it.
As the birth of dragons brings birth to new magics throughout the world and brings life with it, and etc. etc. It'd be nice to see.
yeah, that was
Exposition.
There's something to be said about using your imagination, but it's a movie. Show us the damn stuff in the movie.
show us
That's the
the-
reason we're watching it.
show us the movie. Yeah, there's like a few things I got written down that I wanted to bring up. Like one thing that I thought was weird was like a major plot element in this movie is that the mages are in control and they're mistreating the commoners, which is funny as anyone that's actually played in almost any D&D campaign because you know that's pretty much the complete opposite of how most societies are in D&D. Like
I was going to ask, are there any established societies where the mages are the aristocrats? Because I can totally see that happening because mages do have natural power and I could see them being corrupted and use that power in order to rule over others as an aristocracy. But is that a standard setting for any existing D&D?
I there
I'm
there there,
aware of.
there might be a kingdom or two in some of the settings that are
Yeah.
like that, but never like the main kingdom that's the main focus of any of the campaign settings are like that. In fact, in a lot of them, it's the other way around, where like mages are actually persecuted, like
Because people are afraid of what they're capable of, yeah.
yeah. Or in the case of like Dragonlance, the mages are required to join what was it the oh fuck,
Guild,
it's not a guild, it's like a tower of high sorcery. They
Power of
got
High Sorcery,
they
we have
got
to wear the colored
yeah
robes.
yeah they got three different ones that are actually based on alignment. There's white robes for good, red robes for neutral, and black robes for evil, because the thing is in that they actually draw powers based off of which of the three moons is currently most active. It determines whose spells are currently better. But it's actually illegal in Dragonlance to be a mage and not be part of one of the towers.
Huh.
Which, I mean, I'm sure that's probably where Dragon Age got the idea from in the Dragon Age video games. But yeah, and in most other settings, a wizard is generally somebody that had to study extremely hard to gain their abilities and are more of a loner, so they wouldn't be in charge of anything. Like mage guilds are just not a very common thing at all in D&D.
And of course, this is something that you're only able to glean this if you're paying attention to the movie because they never explain anywhere that the mages are the aristocracy. So if you're trying to come into this movie knowing things about D&D, it's actually
Yeah.
worse than if you know nothing about D&D.
Right. Because you really only know about it. when they're talking about, like when Ridley and Snails are talking about how they're basically talking about how the mages keep the poor man down, kind of thing, and they
Which
use
I mean is a decent enough theme to have in a movie like this, where like it's the commoners versus the aristocracy, and the aristocracy doesn't know about the peasant uprising, but there's people there trying to do good and help them. Like the idea of the movie is not a terrible plot, but it's just terribly told.
right. But the other weird thing is it's a fantasy setting, and Ridley and Snails clearly use like a lot of more modern sounding
lingo,
language and slang, where it's like,
especially Snails, who's played by Marlon Wayans.
yeah, because they're like, well, he's played by Marlon Wayans. He has to sound like a stereotypical funny black guy.
That was the biggest problem I had with the Force Awakens, with Finn, because he was raised from birth to be a soldier, and he still talks with this kind of street lingo.
Which doesn't really work.
No.
And
Feels out of place.
and speaking of modern language, that brings up another problem. So, like early in the movie, the thing that gets the story kicked off is Ridley and Snails are breaking into I think it was called a mage guild. It was either a mage guild or a mage school. They were breaking into it to try to find valuable magic items to sell, and when they get in, they're Snails is like, "This is the stupidest idea you ever had. We might as well steal from God." It's like that line is completely out of that. Yeah, that line is completely out of place in Dungeons and Dragons, and that kind of colored my view of the entire rest of the movie, because at that point I'm like, okay, in D&D there isn't just God, there's gods.
You would have said a specific name,
but instead the people that wrote this wrote it with like a Christian lens, where there's a God and all this is just happening under his watch.
Yeah.
And that bothered me, like that kind of like soured certain scenes throughout the rest of the movie for me, because I was thinking about that.
If there is any sort of people responsible for writing this, because this did come out when 3rd edition was the newest one, but it was so close to the release of that you can't really think anything about 3rd edition with this. If anything, it's based on original Dungeons and Dragons, in the sense that a dwarf is a class, not a race. Same with an elf.
Right.
Which is also something they hint at in some of the dialogue later on again. So,
but even in original Dungeons and Dragons, it was most of the material implied there's more than one god.
Well,
so you can almost play a drinking game with how fast and loose this thing plays with both D&D lore and fantasy lore in general.
They like cherry pick because.
Right.
Very much so. I mean, it doesn't even take place in a normal D&D realm, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, it's very obvious it's not based off of one of the existing settings, but still, it's just weird to hear somebody say just say God in like this high fantasy setting.
Yeah, because not to mention the gods actually do talk in D&D to their followers.
And I did think it was funny that aside from his first line of dialogue, Elwood the dwarf was like the most accurate representation of the kind of character he would be in the actual game, except for just that part where his helmet gets knocked off. He's just like,
and he just starts going,
like he makes this weird
like a honking sound. It's almost like a battle cry, but
like I don't want to be offensive, but it essentially sounds like something. A random noise you'd hear like a mentally disabled person just shout out of nowhere in public or something.
If their helmet was their security item.
Yeah,
saying is
doesn't like it when somebody touches his ears.
Yeah, and I've heard people or
anyone that's worked retail has heard random weird outbursts like that. It's just something that happens.
I'm not putting them down.
I know you're not.
It's just a thing that happens. Yeah.
But he was just, but yeah, and the thing is, so Elwood, aside from that weird introductory line that made us all go, what, was kind of like the most accurate representation of a D&D character in
Even
the movie.
in the sense that he's he's a character that's thrown
Hang on
in
to.
with no reason to really be with the rest of the party. Because everybody's in an event like that. Like it's almost like they had the first three characters, and then you end the session, and then you have to randomly introduce another character because somebody else decided to join. It's like, oh yeah,
Right.
and then between sessions, this guy shows up, and he's with you now.
It's also funny because he's probably the one who's on most of his end game at the start because he sees the bad guys. What does he do? Grab the stuff, grabs the map, grabs the other thief, and then starts a bar fight so it causes a distraction so they can get away.
And Matt, you tried to say something a second ago, but I couldn't hear you over TZ. What were you saying?
His bit about dwarf women.
Oh,
Here,
Oh,
here you
God.
can to.
yeah, I forgot about that. And the thing is like, and the funny thing is even when he's not drunk, it's almost like he's drunk 100% of the time.
Which is kind of a common trend.
It's
people
kind of a
put
common
towards
thing
it.
with dwarves.
I'm not drinking. You're not shopping.
Either they always are drunk or they're so hardened against alcohol that it has like no effect on them. This is usually
yeah,
one of the two
drinking
tropes.
water.
Oh, and his breaking the fourth wall scene.
Oh
Yeah, 'cause
yeah,
they'll just address
Way
the
to run a
camera.
business.
He just goes,
Terrible.
His head is screwed. That's a terrible way to do business. It's like, who are you talking to?
the camera.
Are you talking to the audience?
Talking to the audience, so that way he can then duck out of the camera, and you can reveal the elf, who's been listening to everything.
Who then they do like a face reveal later. Is like, we already know about her. Doing that was kind of pointless.
And now, one last major random thing I made a note about before we'll talk a little bit more about the plot after this and the characters specifically, but this is kind of a minor thing, but it really irked me when I noticed it was that the orcs look like goblins.
Because it looks like they're crouched down all the time.
Right, they don't
They
look
very much are hunched down the entire time.
like they don't look big and strong like you
Yeah,
expect.
we were
an
actually
orc to look.
debating. We had to look it up on IMDb to confirm they were indeed orcs. We were like, are those goblins? No, they're too small to be goblins, but they're too big to be goblins, but they're too small to be orcs. Are they bugbears or kobolds or what are
See,
they?
I knew they were orcs because I was actually watching the news as it was coming out about this movie. I saw their images already being put up as orcs. I've always known they're orcs.
And I do want to point out that, like, admittedly, the costumes for them looked great. They just didn't
Yeah.
look like orcs.
Like orcs.
They didn't look big enough.
It could be the fact that they didn't focus on them too much. They're always kind of in the background, so
That probably
we
didn't
kind of
help
have
either.
this whole suspension of
Maybe they couldn't get tall enough extras to fill the orc costumes.
I was gonna say they also
Possible,
didn't. They also looked like they were very limited in their movement. So those costumes clearly were probably very restricted in their movement.
Right. They had the most complex looking armor out of anyone in the movie.
Mhm.
Yeah, and but so talking about the overall movie, I think the biggest gripe for me about this movie as a Dungeons and Dragons fan is that for most of the movie it feels like the plot is moving forward regardless of the actions of the actual party members. Like the party aren't accomplishing anything. They don't get into any fights until like the last 20 minutes.
which will happen in D&D if you have a bad DM.
Fuck.
True.
They got a bad DM to direct the movie.
Exactly, yeah.
Considering how many bad rolls Snails kept rolling, I believe it.
Okay, this happens eventually because I have this plot that has to happen. The players are completely insubstantial because that's when you have a DM on a power trip that they wrote this story that they have to tell and they don't care what the players do. Because I'm sure you've encountered that.
Yeah, but I mean, I've also known for a fact because I've run a few myself. If they are into it or know ahead of time, then everybody's still having a good time. But it's just the DM's just doing it for the shits and giggles, and players are just stuck with it. Then yeah, it's a bad time.
I I think to an extent TZ already said this, but I think the weird thing is trying to talk about the plot line in this is harder than it will be with some movies because the plot line doesn't even explain itself properly a lot of times. Stuff just happens. Like
It's
the plot.
funny because it half the time is also trying to tell us the plot.
Yeah, then there's
Yeah.
there's random exposition dumps after a bunch of things happen, and you're just like, I feel like the scenes should have explained that to us instead of whatever you went with instead.
Yeah, the biggest issue with that on that note is the whole thing with the stabs. They talk about how important these rods are and that the fact that they can control dragons, but they never really explain.
Right.
Yeah, they can control dragons, but what does that actually mean in the sense of this? Is that because the fact that the Empress has this rod that can control dragons, that's why they can't take her out of power. So they want to get this other rod that can control red dragons
Yeah.
to defeat the gold dragons. But you don't understand this until the very end,
Yeah.
and even then you have to have somebody else explain it to you. It's like, okay, that's
Yeah.
why the gold dragons are fighting the red dragons.
Because Profian wanted this rod that could allow him to control red dragons, and throughout the movie we heard them talking about the Empress's scepter, but until the final battle began, I didn't even understand that her scepter allowed her to summon gold dragons. They
Oh.
never explained it.
You know what? I completely forgot about that. That's why they were trying to do that whole experiment at the very beginning of the movie, anyways.
Yeah, but they don't explain that.
They don't blatantly explain it, but it's hinted to the reason why they want to get the scepter away from her because of after his experiment.
It did a very bad job.
It's basically
Again, very bad job of
it-
explaining it.
it's more or less you had to watch the movie to understand it. So then when you rewatch it, then
You know why the things happen. Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's why he was making the staff at the beginning. Oh, that's why he was trying to get the Empress to relinquish her staff.
Except
Oh, that. But with the first time view, you're like, what?
yeah, it's kind of like, you know how some movies you'll rewatch them and you'll go, oh, they were foreshadowing this. Instead, you rewatch this and you go, oh, that's the thing they didn't explain.
Yes, exactly. The story in this isn't bad. It's just told terribly.
It's told terribly, and as you said, without the beholder, this could be any generic fantasy setting.
Very much.
Which for most people probably would, if it was a generic fantasy setting, probably would have made it far more tolerable that they cast Marlon Wayans in it.
Yeah, true. Well, I mean, even then, I don't. If this had been just any sort of fantasy thing, it probably would not have the notoriety it is today. The reason we're talking about it is the fact that it is so famous as a bad movie because it's called Dungeons and Dragons.
Are you challenging me? I'll make us watch Aragon.
I'd rather watch Hawk
I'll
the
watch
Slayer.
fantasy Star Wars, sure.
Yeah, sure, let's go for it.
That was another one I haven't
You
actually
want to watch
seen yet.
Hawk the Slayer, a real D&D movie?
What's it called?
Hawk the Slayer.
Hawk the Slayer.
Well, I know that one.
It's a fun romp, but man, oh man, is it rough. It's a British movie made in the early 80s, so it's basically like an early 70s movie. And it's very obviously, at least alludes to a lot of ideas from D&D, but they didn't have the budget to completely fulfill them. It
I've
stars
always-
Jack Palance as the lead bad guy, and I think he's the only notable actor in the entire movie.
See the one with the half of the helmet covering his face?
Yes.
Like he's trying to be like a pseudo fantasy Darth Vader.
Yes, he was also the host for Ripley's Believe It or Not for a good number of years.
Oh.
That's where a lot of people know him from, as well as a few other movie roles here and there. City Slickers. Never seen that one. I've heard of it.
Even that title just sounds like your old 80s to 90s fantasy films that were just
Well,
being.
it's Hawk the Slayer, and Hawk is the main character. Although I will say that the more interesting character is probably Crow. Crow the elf.
Hawk the Slayer, Crow the Elf.
Let's get back on track
Anyway.
for the movie we're actually talking about.
Sorry.
But I will say, I just thought of something else, just trying to think about the way the story progressed, because they set up the things, what Profian wants, why the Empress wants to make equality between everybody, so Profian wants to stop that and convinces the mages to help him. Then the whole thing happens with the thieves breaking into the magic school.
And of course, the
So-
thing with the
so-
Empress, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like the whole thing with the Empress, if she's the Empress, why is there even a council involved in this?
Apparently,
That's-
her parents must have set it up before her. I don't know.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's another thing that I would like to. I'm surprised that's not explained. I could assume that maybe it's because like she's too young, so she's going to be taking power because she is extremely young in this. My initial thought was that it's like the childlike Empress from a Never-Ending Story.
She does have
That she
hints
just
of it,
looks
yes.
young, but she's actually just
Yeah.
she just
That-
looks young.
That was the problem. It seemed like they tried to explain things, but they weren't explaining the things that need to be explained.
And this is kind of stuff you can't explain with "it's a fantasy world, it's magic." No, has nothing to do with magic.
If it wanted to explain things, because it did, like at the beginning, it went and explained, and in this world, mages are king, and the commoners are put down, or treated lower than that. It would help that they would at least say, also explain, oh, there's the child empress and the council is in power because the empress is not of age or something like that. That would have helped, but none of that is told or
Nope,
or
that's
said.
explained. It's a really hard story to follow, because it is so poorly told. And then you're just kind of distracted by how over the top all the acting is in this.
Yeah, because you got Prophia trying to tell the council, hey, we need to have a vote. Have the Empress give up her staff so we don't have to worry about her doing things we don't want her to be doing. It's like, she's the Empress. Why would she do anything?
Why is she
over?
still? Why is she handling any of this shit? Why is she taking any of his? Shit?
Why isn't she just saying, guards, arrest them all?
Exactly. You know what? Where are the guards? All the
Prophia's
guards we
pocket.
saw was
They're too
multiple-
busy getting plants put into their head.
Like I said, Profion's pocket.
The
That's where the guards are.
But
yeah,
obviously,
exactly.
so the thing, the main thing about the story is though, so obviously the two thieves, they break into the magic school, and then Profian's homie, what's his name, Dadomir? Damodar. I don't know how I got Dadomir. Damodar shows up. Damodar shows up and kills some old wizard that's not that important because even though he was supposed to be important, we barely knew he existed before he died. And the thieves get framed for that and end up getting sent off with mispretense.
That's what I just like to say about Demodar. He can be pretty menacing, but boy, can you not hear him.
No, yeah, he freaking whispers everything. We were
Talk like this.
We had to turn on the subtitles.
Literally.
well, he wasn't what originally made me turn on the subtitles.
Is louder than me.
But I'm glad you did because I'm pretty positive
Yeah.
I did not hear half of his lines.
At the beginning, the music and sound effects were so loud I couldn't hear anything Jeremy Irons was saying, so I had to turn the subtitles on. And admittedly, the subtitles made the movie more fun than it probably would have been otherwise.
Like they kept subtitling all the different gibberish sounding things
All the
that
grunts and everything.
that Wayne was making, like the
or irritated grumbling. Something like that it said.
oh,
Hands to be darkened.
indeed.
There was like one that was just ZZZX or something.
But yeah. And you know, they get chased by the guards, which leads to the scene where the dwarf was just an innocent bystander until one of the guards shot his helmet off.
Yeah, he was just sleeping in garbage by a sewer pipe for some reason.
He's probably passed out after drinking at the bar.
That's
Oh, man.
actually probably why he was there.
Yeah.
Which might also have been why he just made the really confused noise when his helmet got knocked off. He was drunk and that just killed his buzz. So he literally he just gets added to the group by random circumstance.
Yeah, because he literally just sticks with them, and then next second he's like,
Yeah.
Who's paying me?"
Yeah, that leads into the bar scene where he starts a bar fight to distract the guards. They escape, find out about the wraith that was talked to off screen that we didn't see.
Yeah, that's like the first evidence that there was budget cuts in this movie because the two characters get sucked into the map and they just they're just gone for several minutes of film time, and then they come back. It's like, okay, so the Wraith told us. Like, wait, what Wraith? What the fuck are you talking about?
It was when they got in the map, you could see a brief image of them in like some new area inside the map.
Hmm.
So it definitely feels like there were going to be a scene transition of them being where they were in there.
But they only
But
built
we
the
don't.
set for one room in the new area. That's what it
Well,
seemed
that's
like.
all they needed too was one room, but they couldn't get the effects together to get to the Wraith or whatever, so the entire scene just got axed.
Right. And then
Shame
that
because they had a working skeleton.
and that leads to the scene we were talking about where the dwarf goes, who's paying me? Because they literally had to come up with, okay, why is the dwarf sticking with them after all this nonsense?
He says it's a bad idea, but still follows them anyway.
And then,
Probably if nothing else, because he's a wanted criminal because he ended up caught with them.
Yeah, well, yeah, because he's kind of tied in with the whole killing the wizard.
and
And he
it,
fought the guards, so
and it was funny when Snails asks Ridley, why are we doing this? And then Ridley just kind of gives him this look and looks at Marina Pretense, and freaking Snails realizes he's got a crush on her. He's like, oh man, this is dumb. He's just complaining about how it's dumb for like 20 seconds straight.
Which is funny, considering, Weirdly goes about not liking mages, bashing them all the time. But, yeah, she's cute.
Yeah, and then later on in the movie, he freaking reams her out over something that's not even her fault, in spite of the fact that they very obviously implied earlier in the movie that he's got a crush on her. It's like they couldn't make up their minds.
Yeah, he bashes her, then she explains what happens, and then, like, oh, okay, and then they kiss.
Yeah, and you could sort of see a character arc here, but they never actually take the time to establish it in the movie or do anything with it. Something like this would have done better as a miniseries, like you mentioned.
They put the beginning and the end of the character arc in the movie, and they cut the rest of it out because of budget cuts.
Yeah,
cut
pretty
some
much.
time.
Again, if this was a miniseries, I think this could have worked so much better.
It might have actually been better as a TV show. It might have. Then they end up going to another town. They encounter Ivan Ooze, who has 3 eyes in this for some reason.
Which is actually called
Eyes
Three
been
Eyes.
He's just listed as 3 eyes in the credits. Like it's a character that didn't have an actual name. They meet a guild leader who has the magical MacGuffin they need to get into the cave where the actual rod they need is. And
Dragon's Eye, or was it the Dragon's Tear? I forget which.
It was the Dragon's Eye.
Dragon's Eye, yeah.
And then he says that Ridley has to survive his maze, and like he calls it a maze, but it's very clearly an obstacle course.
Yeah, that's true.
Pretty much.
Because
very much less maze-like.
Yes, there are traps, but it's a straightforward path. There's no.
Yeah. I mean, technically, it does turn when he gets to the eye room from the previous chamber.
It turns a couple times, but yeah, that still doesn't make it a maze. It's still a series of corridors.
Yeah.
Because what was it? There was.
Lady of Pain was having an off day when she designed it.
Oh wow, Planescape reference. I wasn't expecting that.
Cool.
Yeah. So what was it? The first room was like a bunch of guillotines or swinging blades.
Then there's the eye room
With the fight where shot fire out.
A bunch of bladed pendulums, yeah.
Yeah. What was the final one? Because wasn't there was 3 of them, right?
And the last room was like some sort of unlocked vault trap that also had things constantly circling.
Oh yeah,
around
then he
it.
just kind of broke the hourglass.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
he just broke the hourglass instead, and then just all backed off.
You know, I will admit that's not the first time I've seen something that goofy, because I remember playing Star Wars: The Old Republic, and there's like a point where you're playing as a Sith, if you're playing on that side, and you have to solve like a puzzle, and the actual answer was just to use Force Lightning on the object, and none of the other Sith could figure it out.
AKA the most obvious
The most obvious answer. No one tried.
Which the obvious answer being brute force.
Yeah, brute force. So he's like, this hourglass popped out and the ceiling is coming down. I'll just hit the hourglass with my sword because that's how traps deactivate. And it worked for some dumb reason. You're just like, what?
I mean, to a degree, that actually does make a lot of sense, and a lot of DMs actually use that trick. Make something seem overly complicated, but it's literally just press button and you're done.
Then the players die because they couldn't figure out the obvious answer.
Exactly.
The obvious, easy answer.
When asked why he did this film, Jeremy Irons replied, "Are you kidding me? I just bought a castle. I had to pay for it somehow."
Okay, again, Jerry Irons.
Now I'm just seeing him on top of his castle that he just bought. Yes, and
He's like, how come the castle looks all CG?
I stand by. Jeremy Irons is a treasure.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the more entertaining things about this, even though in any other movie he would have felt massively out of place doing the acting he did in this.
More
Oh,
power.
I swear. I mean, if they needed a replacement for Sidious, I generally think he would be perfect.
well, you know, the weird thing is we just watched this movie and some of it is just a blur to me because it was just so
Yeah, the
weird.
fact
Oh, pretty well.
if you don't watch this movie with friends, I would imagine that it would be really quite boring because you have to be able to crack jokes and shit, as like we were doing when we were watching this, just to make it tolerable. Because it's really not that good a movie. It's not particularly engaging either.
Because what was it? So after
They
they got the gem,
They get the gem. The Thieves Guild owner wants the gem for just personal reasons, nothing like major, like they're trying to go after. The guards happen to show up with Damodar, and they have to escape again. But in their attempt to escape, it's foiled, and Damodar grabs both the Mage Girl and the map scroll. And so, as the others regroup outside of town, trying to figure out what's going on, the Elf Ranger catches up with them, contacts the Empress. The Empress says to take them with, try and stop Damodar, and try and rescue the Sorceress and the Scroll. And that's where we get our first bit of actual fighting in the movie.
right?
We
Yeah,
get the non-beholder beholders, and we get the death of snails.
Yes, but the funny thing is, I actually thought he might die when he was sneaking around, thought he did really good, and then suddenly he just started sinking into a part of the floor. It suddenly turned into rice pudding.
Oatmeal.
I called it the La Brea carpets.
If you actually, because I remember actually seeing the behind the scene on that part, they actually made it look almost like it was a real carpet.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can see it.
So you wouldn't have realized it if you looked it up close, you would tell, but from a distance, which they did a couple of scenes when he's looking around, it looks like a regular carpet. It's not.
Yeah, no, the effect on it is pretty good.
Yeah. It's another really good actual physical effect.
Yeah, which again I appreciate.
But
Something that Hollywood has outright.
but the funny thing is, like Damodar could have literally just let him sink into that and die, but for some reason he yanks him out of it just to immediately just start beating the shit out of him like crazy.
Well, he wanted him as a bargaining
Damodar
chip.
style.
Yeah, but that also causes
Damodar style is slow pain.
but that also causes another problem. So he's beating the shit out of Snails. Snails is trying to fight him. Everything other stuff's going on at the same time. Eventually, Ridley and Marina come up to him where he's got Snails on the ground ready to kill him. And he's like, "Give me the gem." And for whatever fucking reason, Snails throws the map towards Ridley and Marina, and then Damodar just shivs him in the back and throws him off a cliff. It's like he threw the map 5 feet. You just killed your bargaining chip because he threw a piece of paper. That's not even what you're after anymore. You want the gem. You needed the piece of paper to find the gem.
Yeah, that makes no sense at all.
You can see the map; it barely goes barely a few feet away from where Snails and he were standing.
Because during that my first thought in that moment was like, wait, why did Snails throw the map? That was pointless. Then I was immediately like, wait, why did Damodar stab him? Wait, why'd he throw him off a cliff? He was probably already dead. Did you really need to throw him off a cliff as well?
It's like, I have to be sure.
That's like when I was watching one of the Friday the 13th movies. Jason walks up behind a guy, shoves his fist through him, and then slits his throat. It's like, he's already dead. Your fist is through him. What are you doing?
To be fair, Jason is special. Demodar, I put up the whole scene, considering, the fact, as you pointed out, he pulled him out of the sinking hole and wanted to use him as a bargain chip, but also beat him up. I think it's just more Demodar just likes hurting people.
He likes
The
hurting
thing is,
people.
this is supposed to be kind of a quote-unquote devastating scene because it is a main character in the movie that you're seeing killed, and then as he's thrown over the cliff of the castle, they have triumphant music playing.
Yeah, I remember you pointed that out. You're like, yeah, they're celebrating the most annoying character dying.
Which is kind of sad because he's also one of the most relatable characters in the movie.
Yeah.
Because he's pretty much just a regular schmo.
He's a regular guy not wanting to get caught up in all this shit. He knows he knows he's in a terrible movie. He's off making Requiem for a Dream when this movie's being made.
Oh man.
And of course, Ridley does the oh so famous, falling down to his knees, screaming.
Yeah, where he's screaming no. I'm just iterating that because you cut out when you tried to say it.
And then goes for I'm gonna beat his ass, and then gets his ass beat.
Yeah, he gets knocked on his ass, and then and then Marina grabs that random pouch that Snails took, where he said, "Ooh, black magic," where it's just like dust in it, which was another thing. We're like, wait a minute, there's no such thing as black magic in D&D. There's just magic.
She grabs it, opens it, and literally lightning bolts Damodar into being paralyzed for a minute.
I guess there's like a hold person spell, but then of course this dust can do multiple things. She uses it to stop Damodar, and then she uses it to make a portal.
Yeah.
Like I said, this has to be Moonstone. That's the only way. But I don't think Moonstone existed in D&D yet.
No, well, actually, wasn't Moonstone an Ultimate thing?
No,
I believe it's a 5th edition.
It's a
It's a reagent that replaces all other reagents in 5th edition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the one. It's the one where the Mr. Big Tooth Bottom Jaw guy was like, "Yeah, you gotta use Moonstone." With that one, that one animated short by what was it, Z Bashaw?
Z, yeah.
Animated spell book.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right.
Moonstone.
But she also did a video on the whole make a dungeon trap seem so complicated, but it's like the answer is so simple.
So, and during this scene though, Ridley also got stabbed in the shoulder because he tried to fight Damodar and got his ass kicked.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite as bad as Snails because he looked like he was at least putting up a fight for a little bit. But then they teleport out of there and they go to the place with the elves. I don't remember if they even explained how they got there or why they went there.
On their way out of there, all of a sudden they're marching with elves.
Yeah, it's one of those scenes that I guess they just had to cut out, and you have to assume what happened during it.
Yeah, it's like we blinked and we missed how they ended up there.
Yeah, pretty much.
Also did the movie.
Yeah, because like I said, when he comes out of his coma, I guess he's saying how he had a dream. It's like, well, nice we saw that, but it's just exposition again.
Yep. So then he gets healed. They have some more exposition. Tom Baker shows up and goes, "Hi, I'm important."
Hi, I'm Tom Baker.
Hello, I'm Tom Baker. I'm just part in about 3 minutes. I'm going to first plant some beautiful imagery in your head. Too bad we didn't have the budget to show you it. And, oh yes, all things are one with magic. Bye-bye.
Oh, and before I go, would you like a jelly, baby?
Here's a strawberry one.
Oh, I wish he heals him with a jelly baby. Here you go.
He healed him with a lime jelly baby.
It's like after a Dementor attack. Here you go.
Then they go to the the cave where the rod they're trying to get that can control red dragons is at. And we've heard the name of the rod at this point. I've forgotten what it is already.
The Rod of Sevril.
Might have.
Severly.
But so he goes in. Only Ridley can go in because there's an invisible barrier that stops anyone that doesn't have the gem from going in. He goes in.
Which they don't explain. They say it's because he's been chosen or something. Give the gem to someone else. Try something else out.
And the funny thing
chosen. He says he has the gem. That's it.
He goes in there, and there's treasure all over the place, as well as a bunch of loot that actually looks better than the shit these people have been using, but he just doesn't pick any of it up. He just goes for the scepter.
Right.
And then
because if he grabs anything other than the scepter, the entire cable collapse.
This isn't Aladdin.
Oh yeah. Actually, we did kind of skip over the part after the elf scene with Tom Baker. That's when we had the scene between Marina and Ridley. While Ridley is
Oh yeah, well Ridley's pissed off because
grieving over snails.
Yeah. So he ends up yelling at Marina about how she doesn't understand, and they have this big scene where she's like, "I do understand now," and they're like, and then they just kiss, and
because she states like, "I got to know you for the last few days, so I'm into you now."
Yeah, I wasn't going to bother putting it into complete words because it wasn't really that interesting of a scene.
I'm sorry, it says the fact she goes and states like it's been a few days. I'm like, it doesn't feel like it.
And then,
but yeah.
So then he goes into the cave. The scepter is being held by a skeleton, which he finds out isn't completely just a dead skeleton when he goes to grab it.
It's supposed to be the person that created.
Person who created the scepter, yeah.
And it's got the best practical effect in the movie was the talking skeleton.
Pretty much.
That's basically like, are you worthy of this rod? And he's like, I don't know if anyone's worthy of this rod. And man,
yeah, and that scene was actually felt like the kind of thing that you would see in a D&D movie, like talking skeletons, and he's not necessarily immediately malicious. He's just a skeleton that's been hanging there waiting for someone to take the rod.
But saying that now reminds me of how throughout the movie, when they kept talking about the rod, I want that rod, I need the rod, we were making innuendo jokes. We were making innuendo jokes the whole fucking movie anytime somebody said that.
Because it's hard not to, just because the way they phrase all this stuff, and the undertones in this stuff with the poses between
it got the worst
Profion
right after
and
that
Damodar.
scene with Damodar. The worst is that after that scene with Damodar, you're just getting outside. Give me the rod. Okay, I don't call it that, but if that's what you want, open belt, drop trowel.
Place guards at every sewer entrance and exit.
I mean, I'm a little surprised that was. He goes, I enjoy.
And this is the scene where like Matt mentioned, you go outside. Damodar's there. He's literally captured everybody, and it's one of those things where you're just like, these fuckers haven't done any good fighting the entire movie. They're the main characters. The dwarf is a fighter, and we literally haven't seen him actually fight anybody yet the entire movie, and he gives him the rod, and then he's like, kill them anyhow. And now suddenly the characters can all just break out and kill all the guards.
Well, sadly, the mage girl, she already rolled her one good 20 earlier with the lightning bolt, so she just gets thrown to the side again.
I know, but like Norda suddenly just becomes a badass, stabs both the guys that were holding her, because apparently when you're holding someone prisoner, you don't think to make sure they can't reach for weapons that you didn't take away from them for some reason.
You do some good flips.
And then the dwarf has like 5 guys around him, and he does like a Kevin Sorbo Hercules thing where he just throws everyone off.
Grabs his battle axe and just begins whooping 10 kinds of ass.
And it's like if stuff like this had happened more frequently in the movie, it probably wouldn't have been as boring up to this point. Since like most of the movie, it's just the heroes have been running for their lives the whole time.
Yeah.
But that happens, and then Damodar just teleports to the city, right? That's what
yeah.
And but Ridley manages to leap through with him. But ironically, Damodar appears, gives the staff to Profion, And all this happens, he takes control of the Red Dragons, and then moments later, then Ridley suddenly teleports in. It's like, he went through the same portal. How'd he take so fucking long to get there?
He got lost.
That's not how
he,
magic works.
he took a left in the portal room when he should
He
have
should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque.
Exactly.
Then we got this massive battle going on in the background between red dragons and gold dragons, but because of the fact that the CGI in the movie is so terrible, they kind of try to just have it be in the background and not focus on it too much.
Well, because they can't make two different dragon models. They have to just do different textures on them.
I think at most they had like different horns shapes on their heads. That was about the major difference for them.
Right.
But the one major scene you at least get was the Empress Savina riding on one of the gold dragons with a gold throne on his back, no less.
It's a terrible composite shot.
And flying around like a freaking X-wing, trying to maneuver around the red dragons, and even doing a barrel roll out of the way for two of them, and two of the red dragons crashing into each other like Looney Tunes act.
But so then, Ridley pops in. He's suddenly got like, at some point earlier that he got like a magic. I think he got it from the elves. He got a magic sword.
The elves.
Oh yeah, when they're meeting with the elves, they give them all like magic armor and stuff.
Yeah, so he's got a better sword. So he actually fights Damodar and defeats him.
Throws them over the
I'm trying to remember.
Lightsaber duel.
Don't the other characters just suddenly show up there, even though they didn't go through the portal?
Eventually.
They eventually show up, even though, like you said, because the portal closed after Ridley went through it.
Yeah, there's not really. I don't think there's any explanation how they got there so quickly.
Specifically there too.
It wouldn't be the first time this movie left something out.
Like how do they know at that specific tower? But Ridley does try to fight Prothean first and loses his sword immediately, and Prothean continues to chew the scene.
Yeah, he chews the scene,
knocks everyone else around,
chews the scene,
gets the staff, and then finally stops the red dragons, and then realizes that it has an ability to corrupt people, I guess. Then throws it down and uses his +2 sword to smash it.
Yeah, that was actually one thing at least also give it, that the skeleton stated how anybody trying to use the staff could be cursed unless they know how to break it, and tells Ridley he has to figure that out himself. And I guess that answer was, I won't be like you, and then smash it.
Smash it.
So then the Empress shows up and fights Prothean for a second, and you're just thinking, there's no way they're going to just have this little girl beat the main villain after everything that's happened. So he knocks her down, and then the gold dragon just shows up and has him for lunch.
She grabs her golden staff, probably to summon it.
Yeah, she grabs her the gold rod again and gets the gold dragon to eat him.
Not before he chewed the scene one more time.
Yep.
And then,
which I mean, I guess is a decent enough way to see the villain go. You want to see him get eaten by a dragon at the end of the movie.
Yeah, that's almost like a Disney villain death.
I do apologize for the dragon. Probably got some serious indigestion.
Well, yeah, he eats him, and then he immediately like dives straight down. Like I thought
he was gonna like smash against something, but no, he's just kind of trying to get some. Yeah,
I thought the dragon was literally just gonna crash into the ground and die after killing the villain. I was just like,
it's like, wow, there really was too much ham in Prothean.
And then the day is saved. They're all sad at Snail's grave, and then Ridley puts down the gem that they use to get into the cave, and it starts glowing, and Snail's name disappears from the grave marker to imply that he's not dead anymore. But they don't show us that. They all start glowing and teleport away, but we don't actually see where they went. We don't see Snails alive again. It's just implied. We don't get to actually see the happy ending. They just, like everything else, it happened off screen.
It's just implied that you have to imagine what happened in this fucking movie. God damn.
Yeah, well, I mean, you hear the Empress giving out...
Imagination.
I mean, you hear the Empress giving out the speech saying, we won. There will be peace between mages and the commoners, but we don't see the speech. We just hear it in the background.
Because it's
And-
cheaper to record in a recording booth than to shoot a scene with a bunch of
and-
extras.
and the court and when Ridley picks up the gem when it's glowing, the elf tells him, "Don't question your gift." It's like, what gift? What? Explain. Because the whole fact is, you starts like a thief, then becomes a swashbuckler, and then maybe something more after that. And they keep implying he has more skills to that because he got into the map, and then of course uh they keep implying the reason he's in the cave, even though that's just because of the gem. And now apparently knowing that snails might be alive, if that's because of him or something else, we don't know. We don't know what he has.
I think Ridley is actually an incubus, and he started gaining magical powers because of the fact that he was romancing the wizard.
Sure, let's go
It
with
makes
that.
about as
You
much
know
sense
what?
as anything else.
It would make about just as much sense. It would be. Makes just about as much sense, and you know what? That's a good headcanon.
Why not?
That's a good way of explaining most stuff in this movie. Sure, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did that
Meanwhile,
just happen? Sure, why not?
I'm just hearing the dwarf father teleporting away, just still going.
When do I get paid? Or I'm gonna be like Balrog from Street Fighter when he gets knocked out. My fight money. Oh,
Oh,
I think that's
oh.
about it though. So, Matt, you got any final thoughts?
It's a extremely hammy movie. It's bad, but it's not like absolutely terrible bad.
Ojunix, you?
I admit I kind of looked bad back on it, but actually watching it again with friends, it's entertaining bad. It's not good on its own, but it's good with friends.
It's better than some of the other movies we're gonna watch. I know that.
Oh,
for
oh
Oh yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
This is definitely one for bad movie night.
Yeah, this is something you would definitely watch more than once. Again, with friends, because that makes it all the better.
Especially if the friends are D&D nerds, because they will notice all the terrible inconsistencies.
Agreed.
TZ, you got any final thoughts?
No, that's pretty much my thoughts on it.
All right. Um, then I think we're done. Everybody calls me Ozzy, but my internet alias is Ozzina Arcane. I will have another YouTube channel that I'm going to be doing that's going to be gaming related sometime soon. So that'll be available when it's available. Matt, you want to tell everybody about your channel before we go?
You can find me on YouTube at Mad Matt. Again, gaming stuff. I do music as well as a few other little things here and there. You can also find my live streams where all the clips come from on Twitch at MadMatt2185.
TZ, you got any website or anything you want to
Yes,
plug?
testzero.net. I'm hoping to release a game at the end of this year.
And Ojunix is just Ojunix. I don't think he has anything to plug.
No, I live under a rock.
You're the berry of this group.
I'll link
Yes.
everybody's Twitter accounts in the description. So until next time in another terrible movie, we'll see y'all later.
Later.
All right.
Later.